The base is dropped on a new edition of Soccer Down Here. It's October 8th. I'm Jason Longshore. John Nelson will be joining us in a bit. He is in transit. He has Georgia Public Broadcasting duties today, so he'll be joining us here in just a bit for most of the first hour. Jessica Sharman and Jarrett Smith will join us in the second hour. It's a Tuesday Thoughts edition of the show, and it's a Tuesday Thoughts edition of the show during an international break in the middle of the gap between the regular season and the postseason in MLS. So as Tuesday Thoughts shows go, they generally turn sideways. You guys can help steer this wherever you want. If you want to lean into that turn sideways, go for it. Ask questions on Twitter at Soccer Down Here. Wherever you want to take it. And the question I put out on Twitter was just, what are some of those soccer questions that you've always wanted to ask? Throw them in. I mean, let's get into some different topics this morning. I want to start with a bit of a preview of our 1v1 that will be coming up this afternoon with John Aiken, who you guys have heard from many times, the head coach at Oglethorpe University. We got into a situation that kind of is universal in the world of soccer, and especially from a coaching perspective. Oglethorpe came into their conference season as the favorite in the conference, and they have had a ton of injuries this year. And in a college season, injuries can derail everything because it's hard to develop the depth, and it's hard to make changes on the fly. And he's had to change formation. He's had to change his center back pairing. He's had to change his whole midfield around. It's been a lot of trial and error, and how difficult it is for a coach in those situations to manage it, because even at a professional level where you have every resource you could imagine, when one player changes from your group and the personality of the group looks different, it's tough to read. And John said that, you know, for him in the condensed college season, there's a lot of instinct involved. There's a lot of gut feeling involved as to, well, you know, I don't have an additional center back, and I need to pick someone. How can I do this? Can I move my right back inside and play another right back? Can I go to 3 in the back? Can I go to, instead of a 4-3-3, could I go to a 4-4-2? Could I go to a 4-5-1 to protect that position? Can I rely on this freshman who's still learning the way we want to play? Because I think the other thing that complicates it for a team like Oglethorpe is they try to play in a very Barcelona, Dutch possession style. They ideally want to play in a 4-3-3. They want the ball. They want to get forward. They don't want to bomb it out of the back. They want to play. That's when it's more difficult. It's one thing if you are a, I guess, simpler team would be the way to put it, tactically, because then you can replace a player and keep it simple for them and just say, you know, look, don't get caught in possession in your own half. If you don't have time, play it long. We'll reset. We'll rebuild. That's all fine. Just, you know, keep it simple. Keep it simple. That's what you hear a lot of times. But when you try to play, and this gets down to preference as well, and I definitely lean to the direction of enjoying teams that want to play more, that want to build more, that want the ball more. Those are the kinds of teams that I just enjoy that style of soccer more. It's harder, and it's a harder road, and it's a more challenging road. And I think the rewards are when you play well in that type of system, it's very difficult for teams to beat you. The risk is you create opportunities for mistakes to beat you, but you're believing in your group to be able to play the better soccer and control the outcome of the match. And it goes back to the basics of how you want to approach it. Are you approaching a game to be in the dominant position? Are you approaching a match? Are you approaching a season to be in a defensive position and wait and see what the opponent's going to give you? Or as we've seen many teams start to do, are you going to try to control the match with a defensive tactic, like a press, like a counter press? Different elements of that, bunker and counter. How are you gonna do these different things? How do you adapt? And then in a season for a coach, when you have injuries, can you play the same way or in the same system or in the same style while you're incorporating new players? It's probably the hardest thing a coach deals with, because there's no blueprint for you. Even in a professional situation where you're going into the postseason, if you're a Major League Soccer team, and you have an injury happen now, like Toronto could be facing with Josie Altidore, like NYC could be facing with Eber or Ismail Tajori Shradi, like a number of teams are looking at coming out of decision day. You get into a 2-week time frame here where you're not going to have necessarily everyone, but most everyone as you prepare. Can you come up with a new tactic, or can you put some duct tape on your initial tactic with a new face in it and get a result that you need? It's not easy, and I think that goes back to some of the praise that I think the managers who have had good seasons this year, Bob Bradley being one. Bob Bradley's had to deal with injuries here down the stretch, and we've talked about it so many times. LAFC is not as dominant as they were without Adama Diomande and moving Carlos Vela around, trying to figure out how to mask Diamande's absence. But they're a difficult team to beat. They're not losing a bunch of games in that way either. That's a credit to Bob Bradley for figuring it out. It's also a credit to him for first trying Vela in the number 9 role, realizing we're losing too much here. Can we make a different move that will have us not lose as much? And moving Diego Rossi there, playing Brian Rodriguez on one side and Vela on the other, has been more effective. And it looks like he's kind of figured out the way to move forward at the moment. How will Giovanni Savarese deal with the news yesterday that I think caught everyone by surprise, in that Brian Fernandez will be away from the team after checking into the substance abuse program with Major League Soccer? And Brian Fernandez is a player who has had issues in the past. And according to some of the reports that have come out, he asked Portland and MLS for help because he's going through some difficulties and didn't want to repeat some of the bad behavior that he's had. It's a credit to Brian for reaching out and getting the help that he needs. And as Portland said, our number one priority is Brian's emotional and physical well-being. Our thoughts are with him. But now you get back onto the field. Brian Fernandez has been a huge player for the Portland Timbers this season. Probably the most dangerous player they've had. It was a very big transfer that the Timbers paid to Necaxa in Liga MX for him. And Portland has been very clear in knowing and saying that they've known his history. He's been very honest and open about it, according to Gavin Wilkinson. He's owned his past. But now this happens on the edge of the playoffs. How do the Timbers, a team that have struggled scoring goals, even with Fernandez, how do they deal with this? Is it simplify and get defensive because they're going to be on the road? They're the 6th seed. This is a team that can bunker and counter. Do they just make the game simple without Fernandez? I'm leaning that way. I think that's what makes the most sense for the Timbers. I think that's what fits the personality of that group. It fits the personality of a Giovanni Savarese, their manager. Or do they try to throw a curveball at the opponents? They try to throw a curveball at RSL and go with something unexpected to catch them by surprise. You've seen that work at times as well. Think back to the 2002 World Cup and Bruce Arena going 3-5-2 against Mexico. Mexico had to make a first-half substitution because they were so caught by surprise with that move. It wasn't something that Arena had showed in the tournament. It wasn't something that was common. And Claudio Reyna, playing as a right wing back, completely baffled the Mexican side. And it was a huge part of the U.S. beating Mexico in the round of 16 at the World Cup in 2002, one of the greatest wins in American soccer history. It was something that caught the opponent by surprise. that's the balance that you have to try to strike when you're managing a team, whether you're John Aiken with Oglethorpe University, whether you're Giovanni Savarese with the Portland Timbers, Bob Bradley or Frank DeBoer with powerhouse teams in MLS. When something happens and you lose a key element to your team, how do you respond? And for me, I think that's where managers truly show their quality. How they handle adversity, how they handle these challenges that happen, and how the team responds to the decisions that the manager makes. It's very rare that there is an obvious solution in these situations because the group always changes when someone leaves it and someone new comes in, even if it's just a personality of the group. It's the most difficult thing I think a manager faces. So when I see a manager like John Aiken get things right when he has to bring in a freshman, for example, into the back line where it's a very veteran-laden group. The freshman comes in and it fits, it works, it fits. That's always an impressive show by the manager of understanding his group and also the players understanding how to incorporate that new player. It's one of the challenges, and it's one of the hardest things, I think, to get right. And when it happens, it's always something that I think makes managers feel really good about their decisions that they make. Let's take a break. We're going to get into the Twitter timeline. Lots of different kinds of questions this morning. I like it. We're going to get into all of that. Jessica Sharman and Jarrett Smith are going to join us in hour number 2. John Nelson's going to join us here in just a bit when he gets to his destination and gets into a car for a long ride. But we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back after this. Hang out with us.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Welcome back. Soccer Down here, October 8th edition, Tuesday Thoughts edition. Give us your thoughts on Twitter at Soccer Down here. Ask any question you want to ask, and I'm going to introduce John with that question. What is the soccer question you've always wanted to ask?
And I guess coming from a journalistic perspective, this would be the way that I would phrase it. If you could have lunch for a table of 4, who would be at your table? Living or dead, doesn't matter.
Okay, that wasn't where I was expecting it to go. Let's see. I
know one.
No, you think you know one, but you don't know as much as you think you know.
All right.
I'm not going out partying with this person. I'm going to have dinner with them.
This is like lunch. This is breaking bread, having a nice meal, maybe some wine and some pasta or whatever you want to do for lunch.
Johan Cruyff would be one.
Okay.
I think the way he saw the game was pretty fascinating, and as I was talking about in the first segment, like I always leaned to teams that want to play with the ball and have possession and play in a proactive way, and that was what he just constantly fought for in the game. So I would love to have him at the table. Who else would I want to be there? I would love it. It's somebody I have talked to before at an event, and I'd love to have them in this type of setting. And with Cruyff there, too, it would be an interesting dichotomy because both were big parts of the North American Soccer League. Ricky Davis. Ricky Davis was one of the... I don't want to say first because that's disrespectful to the 30s and 50s and the different eras of American soccer, but Ricky Davis in the North American Soccer League after Kyle Rote Jr. was the first American to really break through, and he played for the Cosmos, and he played alongside all the greats of the Cosmos. Was a player who probably could have played in Europe, but it was a completely different time at that point. Loved the conversation I had with him years ago and would love to hear about those days and some of the challenges and just what it was like then. Who would be the next one for me? Let's see. I'll throw another random one in here because I think he is one of the best managers ever and a complete throwback because I don't think we'll ever see another manager like him. Sir Alex Ferguson. I think that trio would be a lot of fun because Ferguson and Cruyff I don't think are they're not opposites in the way they see the game. They're not exactly in line with one another. So that would get some good debate, good conversation going. Ferguson's a student of the game. Cruyff and Davis with their time in the NASL, hearing those stories. I think it could be a lot of fun. That'd be a good trio off the top of my head.
Yeah, for me, I like your Sir Alex. I would want Pep Guardiola at the table just to sit there and have Sir Alex and Pep playing off each other. And when if it gets into a tactical discussion or if it gets into that kind of a discussion there, and then just for recency's sake, I'd like to have Tata at the table. So if you had Tata, Sir Alex, and Pep Guardiola at the same table, what that would be like.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you want to go more current, sure. Pep and Sir Alex, who both they have a lot of respect for one another, and it was interesting in I think one of Pep's books talking about the chance he had to meet Sir Alex, and one of the first things, because this was around the time that I think Pep was thinking about leaving Barcelona, and it wasn't going as well. And Sir Alex is like, why would you ever leave Barcelona? You'd be crazy to. But you look at Sir Alex and his time at Manchester United, and he didn't understand the challenges Pep was facing at Barcelona, and they both just had a very different approach. I mean, Pep was as hands-on as you can get with a team, and Sir Alex, also learned to delegate over time. So they had very different ways of viewing the management side. And those conversations would be really fascinating. So, yeah, that's a good question. I'd be curious to see what else other people say on it. Lots of questions, and I'm not surprised that this comes up from our friend Tafka. Of the players for which we know raises extensions will be necessary, who is the most important not to let leave? One, we don't truly know. I'm trying to think of what we do know, and it's all secondhand because this stuff isn't official. I know early in the season, Doug Robertson reported about negotiations on either new deals or options or what have you with Gressel and Leandro Gonzalez Perez. Those were two that were mentioned by Doug. Nagbe, I think, has been assumed, and I don't know the length of his deal. I know he signed a new deal in Portland during his time there, but I don't remember if any terms came out of that. And that's the challenge of doing this, is we don't know what these contracts truly look like. There's a lot of guessing. It's difficult. Let's take it, since we don't exactly know that, and we don't know what grouping of players we're talking about. Let's just talk about, for Atlanta United, who are the most important players that you need to build around for next year. I mean, Joseph obviously is a key. I don't expect, and I know there's been some conversation about this, I don't expect Barco or Pitti to go anywhere in the offseason. You never know with a young talent like Barco. You never know who could come knocking on the door. But I don't think it's quite time yet. I think there's still more for him to do here to raise his level, and also more for the market to mature a bit for him. 2020 could be a huge year for Ezequiel Barco. I mean, you're talking about potentially an Olympics. You're talking about potentially a Copa America. There's a lot of different opportunities with the Argentine national team for Barco, let alone what he can do in Atlanta with a CONCACAF Champions League run. So I don't expect him to go anywhere. I think Pitti will be better in year 2. I think he's been good this year. For the hype, which is not even a fair word, I think for the performance that he came in off of at River Plate, he hasn't matched that. He also has not been a bust, and anyone who would try to lead you down that road is not paying attention to his goals and assists output, let alone anything else. But he can be better, and I think 2020 you would expect him to be better. So you've got your attacking trident formed with Atlanta United. That's a pretty good group to build around first. And then what is important beyond that? Miles Robinson's not going anywhere just yet. It's potentially a huge year for Miles Robinson as well, with an Olympics, with looking like more and more senior national team opportunities. He was just called back into the senior national team, if you missed the news yesterday, with Walker Zimmerman's scary head injury from the LAFC match on the weekend. He had to leave the team, so Robinson will step into the senior team instead of the U23 camp during this international break. George Bello is going to be critical next year. He will likely be going to the U17 World Cup for the U.S. Probably camp will open any time now as that tournament gets started at the end of the month. Beyond that, so we've talked about the front, we've talked about the back, obviously Brad Kazan as well. Who else jumps out to you, John, as critical pieces to build around for 2020?
Well, I mean, obviously Brad Kazan and net, but the first name that popped into my head was LGP.
And he's one that we do know could be either out of contract or going into an option year. We don't know exactly what the situation is, but it's one that Doug has mentioned, a contract situation for 2020. That's the best way we can put it. And we're not trying to be intentionally vague. We don't know. These things are not public.
And knowing his control and how much of a factor he is at the back and how he's able to hit the diagonal and turn a team on its heels when Atlanta United is trying to work things offensively. For me, it's LGP, and obviously, with Cap's retirement, that creates another vacuum when it comes to leadership. And so I think on multiple fronts, on the pitch, off the pitch. I mean, and we've seen it with LGP in the past where it's been his Instagram and we've seen everybody hanging out and having dinner and all that kind of stuff. So I think having his presence as a leader on and off the pitch for me is important with this contract situation that we have at the end of this season. So for me, LGP would be at the top of the list. I
think he's high on the list. I think if whatever contract situation doesn't work out, then you're going to have to replace him with a player of that ilk, that age, that time frame, because you're looking at guys who could be coming through. George Campbell signing a homegrown deal. That's a huge ask for him to go straight into the first team. I don't think he's quite ready for that yet. You want to ease him into those situations. Garrison Tubbs is still in the academy. He's one who can project to a professional deal down the road. But again, down the road, you have a few former academy players who are in college who could potentially project to that as well. Kendall Edwards, Bryce Washington are two, but still down the road. So you're going to need someone, if it's not LGP, you're going to see someone like him come into that situation. I think that's a critical part. The midfield's probably the biggest question for me, and a lot of it comes back to when you look at what this team can be at full strength. Do you want to play 4-3-3? Do you want to play 3-4-3? Do you want to have flexibility and have midfielders who can play in all of the different types of shapes you would consider? Well, that's like, I want my cake and eat it too, and oh yeah, I want those cupcakes over on the other table, and I'll take some of the chocolate mousse from the other side too.
And I want cake for breakfast, and I want the coupon to make sure that I can get all the cupcakes, especially the ones with the sprinkles.
Yeah, and that's not real life, John, because then you throw up and end up passed out in a sugar coma in the back side of the room. So you don't want that. You've got to be realistic here. So I think you do have to be thinking, and I'm sure that Frank DeBoer and the technical staff, along with Carlos Bocanegra, are thinking about, all right, how we get through this year, but also looking ahead to what we could have for next year. What are the priorities? How do we want to look? How is our ideal way to look? Because that's going to affect decisions on players who come back. Darlington Nagbe is one who's been rumored. Don't know his contract situation. He's been so good for this team, and he can play in any kind of midfield you want. He's a player who, in Portland, it was discussed that he was due for more money coming soon, and reportedly that was one reason why Portland traded him. We'll see what happens. Darlington Nagbe has been a great piece of Atlanta United over the last 2 years, an absolutely great piece. And I think this year he's taken on even more responsibility at times, driving the team forward. You'd love to have him back in any way possible because of his talent. Eric Remedi is a player who is similar in a lot of ways, which sounds a little crazy. I don't think he's quite as technical, but in terms of the amount of ground he can cover, in terms of the amount of impact he can have in a match, Eric Remedi is so important. I don't know if Remedi, in the way that this team wants to play with its defensive side of the holding midfield, it's 6 or 5 if you're Argentine, I don't know if he's the best option to sit in front of a back 4 and protect, because it takes away from what makes Eric Remedi such a good player in pushing forward and going and jumping into a passing lane and reading the game and going out hunting. Jeff Lorenowitz is a big question. I think you'd love to have his leadership back, especially with Michael Parkhurst retiring. And Jeff Lorenowitz, to me, has not looked like a player who is losing a step. No. I think the second half of the season, when we've seen Jeff Lorenowitz, he's been very, very good. I could easily see another year from him where he's not just making up the numbers, another year where he's a key part of a midfield rotation at least. Emerson Hyndman, that's 4 guys who are all shades of different elements of central midfield. But Hyndman, you gave up a good bit to get his rights, to get him on loan for 6 months. I don't think you did that without the expectation that you're going to keep him. So then, are you going to keep all 4? And is it just that rotation? Is it just in a 4-3-3, I like this trio first? In a 3-4-3, I like these 2, and maybe this one moves into a different spot. In a 3-5-2, I like this trio, or 2 of them with one of my attackers in a different role. It's a great situation to have. I wonder how sustainable it is to keep all 4, and that would be the challenge, I think, for the front office and for the roster development.
And I'm going to ask this next question because I legitimately do not know the answer. How many other individuals in MLS or in leagues where players can be accessible and be brought in, how many players are the same kind of stabilizer that Darlington Nagbe is in the midfield around MLS? How many players do you think are of that caliber in MLS right now?
Well, there's lots, but it's all about personality because there's lots of stabilizing central midfielders, but they approach it differently. And that's the thing. Like what Darlington Nagbe does from a domestic player, I don't think there's another one like him. But what Darlington Nagbe, his impact, you can achieve it in different ways. Harris Medunjanin has been outstanding for Philadelphia. He's going to sit more than Nagbe, and he's going to be more involved in the passing game, a little bit more of that metronome. But he's been critical in establishing the central midfield for Philadelphia. And Alejandro Bedoya has been his running buddy next to him, who's been able to push forward more and is maybe more in that Nagbe role. Again, it's a different personality of it. I don't know if Bedoya is quite as technical. Bedoya might be a little grittier, gets stuck into a tackle a little bit more, gives you a little bit more from that side. He's more of a, I think, emotional leader as well. Doesn't mean he's more effective. If you flipped them, would they be as effective for the other group? I don't know. That's the thing you never know, because I think a lot of times when we have these discussions, it's about this player does this, and this on the field. They're technical, they tackle well, and they're good with long passes. But we don't talk about, because it's the hardest thing to talk about, how they fit the group and how they fit the group dynamic. Darlington Nagbe, obviously, with the pranks with Parkhurst and others, Nagbe fits this group dynamic very well. Would a more in-your-face type of player, like an Alejandro Bedoya, would he fit this group? Or do you already have enough of those? And do you need someone like Nagbe who is a different personality? That's the element that's really hard to predict, because you can go and build a team on paper with players to play in a certain way, and you can make all the right decisions, but it can look wrong because of the personalities of the individuals, and especially in the position groupings, the personality of that group. The best soccer players might not make the best team, and that's where it gets very challenging when you have this conversation, because when someone leaves the group, you can't go out and get someone with the exact same skill set and personality. So you have to start making decisions on where it fits and who can you get and who can replace them and who can fit into the group you have. It might not necessarily be just the best player out there. It might be the right kind of person.
And a lot of folks have been on the timeline this morning. They've been mentioning Julian Gressel as well.
Yeah, and he's another one where you wonder what the situation's going to be, and he's one that has come up in terms of, is he a guy who would potentially be leaving this team? He was on a rookie deal. I think, according to Doug Robertson's reporting, he's on an option for next year. But not sure what that looks like. And this is the classic story that you see all the time with a player who comes up, and whether they come up through the academy at the club or they come up, as a draft pick in this situation, and outperform their rookie deal. And Julian Gressel has given you more than probably all but a couple of draft picks in the last decade of Major League Soccer, and he might be the most successful player to come out of the Super Draft. I have to go back and compare some stats. But you had no way of knowing that, and you had no way of giving him a contract that would be able to see into the future,
Yeah.
So now you're at a point where, okay, he's got a track record, and he can demand a different level of compensation. In a salary cap league, it's a different conversation than a club overseas, where you just make a decision like, yes, you've earned a raise, you've earned this money, we're going to sign you to a new deal and pay you X. In a salary cap league, you got to figure out, can you make that fit? And then how does it affect the whole group, and how does it affect the overall cap? And that's more difficult, I think. I think Julian Gressel has given you a lot of versatility. I think he plays his best in the 3-5-2 with a wide role, but with lesser defensive responsibilities. I think you want him affecting the game going forward rather than him going backwards and defending. I think he's better in that type of role. Could you get that in a 4-3-3? You could. Could you get that in some other shapes? You could. And that's going to be the biggest question, I think. It goes back to, how do you want this team to play in an ideal situation in 2020 and beyond? And if it's a different way, if it's not the 3-5-2 that we're seeing right now, do you project a Julian Gressel or any other player in the conversation, but Gressel right now, do you project him to be as effective in a 4-3-3 playing as the right winger up high? Do you project him to be as effective in and I don't think it's on the cards, but a 4-4-2 diamond where he's tucked in but can drift out wide? Do you project him to be as effective there, and what do you project his output to be there, and then that affects how much you want to pay him for that? These are all very difficult questions. It's not as simple as anyone would lead you to believe in all caps, pay the man, and that's it. Because there's domino effects in a salary cap league, and you have to think about where you're going down the road with how you want the team to look. Because this year, Frank de Boer has had to mix and match. He's had to change shape multiple times. He's had to, adapt to the group that he's working with, and they've had to adapt to him.
Right.
At some point, you want to have a consistent way of playing, and he hasn't been really able to implement that this year. You would think that going into 2020, he would.
And Frank de Boer, I'm sure, in a perfect world, he has his whiteboard chronicles laid out, and he knows how he would like to play. And I'm sure that on a worldwide stage, I'm sure that Frank has players in mind that he has been keeping an eye on, that he would like to bring in to introduce to Atlanta United for his ideas about how he wants to do things formationally and personality-wise and all that. So the external coming inbound, I think, is another part that has to be thought of here, is that we're looking at the roster as it's currently constructed, but I'm fairly safe to think that Frank and Carlos Bocanegra and everybody else in the front office and Darren Eales, as they're sitting there saying, okay, I'm looking at guys here, and here that could help out and be fits for what I would like to do in a perfect world as well come next season.
Well, yeah, but this gets back to MLS. I think, sure, you always have that depth chart of what you're looking at that could come in from the outside, but I don't think there's a spot or the money associated with it right now to just plug someone in. I think you would have to create a spot with someone going out to bring someone in. That's where it gets trickier in MLS as opposed to teams in other leagues around the world where it's just, I really like this player, I'm going to sign them. Cool. I can have 5 striker options at varying ages because I can do that because I have the money to pay them. Here, you can't. So you can have ideas of who you'd like to bring in, but with the way this roster is currently constructed and where the cap is, somebody's got to go to make room. And that's what adds to the complications of it. You don't know who you could be looking at to come in, and you've got to make room for any new additions. It's going to be a fascinating offseason, and I think it's only going to get more and more like that as the team continues to mature, because MLS is continually getting into a different level of conversation about what players could come here or want to come here or should come here. You're going to see younger South Americans coming, like Brian Rodriguez at LAFC, like Ezequiel Barco here. You're going to see, I think, more players in the prime of their career in Europe, maybe not at a top team or maybe not even in a top league, decide, you know what, I want to go to MLS. Alexandru Mitrita, great addition to this league. Jan Gregush, great addition to this league. 2 players that have played in Europe, have played in Champions League football, you know what? They're not going to they're not going to go to the Premier League or La Liga or the Bundesliga or Serie A and play with a top team. They can come here instead of playing in a lower tier league in Europe and play in front of more fans, play in better venues, yes, even Yankee Stadium, and play in environments that are more challenging to them and more rewarding in a lot of ways. I think in the next 2-3 years, the player pool that MLS can pull from is going to increase very fast. And how teams manage that, and I think Atlanta's as well positioned as anybody to deal with it because of the scouting network, because of the relationships that have already been built. I think that's going to determine who your best teams in the league are. The teams that are stuck in the older days of signing guys from the lower leagues here in the U.S., bringing in college players, expecting that to be the core of your team, those are the teams that are going to get left behind. The ones that are figuring out where their hook is. For Atlanta, it's been South America. For Minnesota, I mean, they finally got some of the Scandinavians right. It took a while, but they finally got it with a Jan Gregush.
Yep.
NYC has a completely different kind of network because of the New York City connection and the Manchester City connection and the City Football Group connection. You're talking about a whole different way of bringing in players. I think Red Bull could exploit their global network more and bring in young guys from Salzburg or Leipzig who are not breaking through. Those things are going to happen. So it's going to get really interesting how these rosters get constructed over time. We're going to take a quick break here and come back. More of your questions on a Tuesday Thoughts edition of the show. Whatever you want to ask it on Twitter at Soccer Down Here. We'll be right back after this.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service, Ad Council, and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinsky of Apolinsky and Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
Welcome back. Soccer Down here. Going to wrap up hour number 1. Jessica Sharman will be joining us in hour number 2. Jarrett Smith will be joining us as well in hour number 2. We'll see what Tuesday thoughts are on their minds. Had one from Eric Schwartz. He asked if any first-year coaches have won MLS Cup. I'm looking at it now. There's been a few, actually. We'll throw out Bruce Arena in the first year of the league because that's not fair. Bob Bradley, it was his first senior, it was actually his first head coaching job at a professional level in 1998 with the Chicago Fire. He had been an assistant for Bruce Arena at DC United. He had coached in college. First year with the club, Thomas Rongen in 1998 with DC United. And again, these are all the early days of the league. After that, first year with the club, Brian Schmetzer in 2016, and it was his first MLS head coaching job. He had been a head coach with the Seattle Sounders in USL, but he took over for Siggy Schmid halfway through 2016 and ended up winning. I think that's it. Looking back at it, and I'll confirm this, Steve Sampson's the other one. I'm trying to see when he started with the Galaxy. No, he went in 2004, so he wouldn't qualify. Schmetzer's the last one who took over mid-season for Schmid in 2016. And then most of the others are in the very early days of the league.
Nick Alifi has chimed in with his table for 4, which he turned into a table for 5.
Ah, well, you can always pull up a chair.
Ancelotti, Tata, Jurgen Klopp, and Darren Eales.
You can almost pull any group together and you're going to get an interesting conversation. That would be a really cool one with Ancelotti and Tata and Klopp, who, I think Klopp has the most defined way of playing, although he is adding to it, and Liverpool is, I think, doing some different things as they evolve. Tata has a fairly well-defined way of playing, but he's pragmatic. He'll adjust. Ancelotti's by far the most pragmatic, and I think at times pragmatic becomes a negative word when it comes to soccer coaching. It's not at all. I mean, what does the word pragmatic mean? It's not a negative word. It's about, from a coaching perspective, what it should mean is being realistic about what group you have, not being tied to one particular way of playing and making the decision that gives you the best chance for results. That's not negative. Like, pragmatic gets used as a term for a defensive coach.
Pejorative, yeah.
And that's not it. Like, there are defensive coaches. There are coaches who play a defensive style.
And they've won a lot of titles.
Well, true. They have, and they've also lost a lot of titles. So, I mean, it's not that's the thing that I don't want to – I wouldn't start that. I wouldn't say, like, oh, defensive coaches, they've won a lot of titles. Defensive coaches are defensive coaches. Flat out. There's coaches who are offensively minded coaches who have won a lot of titles. And there's been offensively minded coaches who've never won a thing. And then there's guys like Ancelotti who are kind of like, all right, what do I have here? I'm replacing Pep Guardiola at Bayern Munich. Okay, let's continue along with what was going on. Let's keep going with that. Oh, you got an injury here. Okay, let's make a change here. All right, let's adjust as we go. Or I'm replacing somebody who's more defensive. All right, let's continue on the path that we're already on, and let's make adjustments on the fly as we go. He's able to get the most out of any group. That's a fascinating story. And then somebody like Darren, who has built a club from scratch, but also worked in big clubs. To look at that coaching conversation from Darren's perspective and where he chimes in would be really, really interesting. So I would eavesdrop on that table that Nick's got.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. See, and that's the codicil, is that we're allowed to eavesdrop. If that was not our choice for table, that we're allowed to eavesdrop on said conversation.
Oh, of course. For sure.
Jim Lepp wonders about the expansion draft and who may be lost in it from an Atlanta United perspective.
Do not worry about the expansion draft is the number one thing I would tell you, because there's a very good chance Atlanta loses somebody. I don't think they lose somebody that they can't afford to lose. You're going to be able to protect 12 players instead of 11 this time. I'm assuming that the rest of the protection rules are the same. Homegrowns, Generation Adidas, you don't have to protect. I believe there was a rule where you had to protect a certain percentage of your international players in the past, which, if that continues, okay. It's a thing that I think we always worry about to a degree that you shouldn't, and it's also one that's impossible to predict, because just like the contract situation stuff, if you don't know all of the contracts, you're going to see a name that's left unprotected and be like, oh, how can you leave him unprotected? Oh, my gosh. But it's a player who's out of contract, and their rights would be with Atlanta, and the other team would be drafting their rights, not knowing if they could re-sign them. And they're probably not going to do that. So they know that stuff. We don't. That's what makes this almost impossible to predict. I don't think they lose anyone that they cannot afford to lose. And the question that Jim asked about, if you expect Nagbe to leave, do you leave him exposed? Again, it gets to that element of, is he under contract for next season? Is it an option year? Is he going into the last year of his contract? Do you want to move him while you have leverage to do so? You know, there's so many things that go into it that you just, there's no way to know. I don't think you would leave him exposed if, assuming that you have control of his contract, you know he's under contract. I don't think you leave him exposed, because you can get more for him in a trade if you are not going to re-sign him to a new deal, if he wants more money. And I know I've said if about 57 times, but that's the way we have to play this stuff, because we don't know anything. If you have control over him, you don't leave him exposed, because if you've made the decision that he would be traded, you're going to be able to get more in a trade than the award. I can't remember how much allocation money it is, but it's like $100,000, $200,000 in allocation money that you get if you have a player picked in the expansion draft. You're going to get more than that in a trade if you're looking at moving him within the league, or you would get more than that in a transfer if he was to leave the league and go play in another league. So you would not leave him exposed, I wouldn't expect. Now, if somebody's out of contract, that's a different conversation about leaving them exposed, because if you don't think you're going to be able to re-sign them and do anything with it, and you don't know if you're going to be able to just trade their rights within the league, maybe you leave them exposed. I hope that makes some sense, because it's such a convoluted situation, and I really do believe that the league would be better served if we knew more of this. I say it all the time, but I think the NBA has gotten it right with how much information they put out on these things, because you are able to dig deep into roster construction. And for people who want to be, roster nerds, you can be a roster nerd and dig into the cap, and you know what crazy mid-level exception a team has to be able to go sign somebody. Whereas we're looking at it like, there's a roster spot, but we don't know how much money or allocation money they have to work with to put a player in that spot. And we don't know all of the rules. We only know some of the rules. It's tough. And it makes these conversations really difficult to have, because we just don't have all the information.
Yeah. And you want to, in our position, you want to sit here and give all the information. You want to lay things out. But because we don't, all we can sit here is say, well, if this is possible, and so on. So admittedly, you're leaving a lot of variables open in conversations like this. But yeah, to your point, I think that if MLS worked their way more toward an NBA approach for divulging salary figures and cap and things like that, to where fans could have an understanding and could be minor capologists and roster nerds and things like that, I think it would help out from a fan perspective in understanding just what front offices are having to do with the constraints that are there for MLS right now.
Yeah, you'd just be able to have more conversations about it. More conversations are good things in these regards. All right, let everybody know what you're about to go do, because you're about to leave us.
Yeah, it's being one of the other me's, partnering with master sales guru Jim Jones. We're heading up to Rome to talk to some folks for Georgia Public Broadcasting. So we're doing that. Obviously, heading up for the day and then driving back, but obviously back tomorrow. And there are questions in the queue for Jess from a goalkeeper's perspective. And so it'll be interesting to hear what Jess has to say in hour number 2. But back tomorrow is normal, and we'll rock and roll and head closer to all the international play. But it'll be interesting to hear what Jess and Jared have to say in hour number 2. Looking forward to it.
Well, be safe on the roads, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.
Check.
And we're going to take a break. We'll get
Mucho
Jess. Mucho plata to you, too. And we will get Jess on the line and be back right after this.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Welcome back. Hour number 2. Soccer Down here, October 8th edition. It's a Tuesday Thoughts edition, and it's a different kind of Tuesday Thoughts edition. Basically put it out there, whatever questions you've ever wanted to ask them. And it doesn't mean we have the answers. We'll try to give you the answers that we have, but it could spark some interesting discussions. And we've had some good ones in these open-ended kind of show. John is tagged out. He's headed to Rome, and we've tagged in Jessica Sharman right now to join us. What's up, Jess?
Not much. Happy Tuesday. Looking forward to a different type of show today. Excited to see what sort of questions we can try and tackle and use our knowledge, whatever knowledge we may have this Tuesday morning.
Yeah, that's always a frightening thing. Nathan Pugh gives you an easy one straight out of the gate with your goalkeeper background. Nathan asks, why aren't all keepers taught from a young age to command their box? Van der Sar did, Buffon did/does, Cech did, Alisson does, Guzan does, Oblak does. I see too many timid keepers, and Nathan is a huge Liverpool fan, so he is looking at Mignolet and Karius. He said, is that what separates world class from average about commanding the box?
I think a lot of it's to do with the limited availability of goalkeeper training. Now, all across the world, goalkeeping training is harder to find than regular training. We talk about, kids all the time having access to practice, professional coaches, stuff like that. But even within good professional coaching outlets, there's a limited availability of good goalkeeper coaches. So if you just have a dad or even a professional coach that thinks they know goalkeeping, but they're not a goalkeeper, they're not going to be teaching the goalkeeper the way they need to learn. It's also a personality trait. There are goalkeepers that aren't really suited to that demanding level of goalkeeping. Maybe they're more timid. Maybe they're not as comfortable with their back line, stuff like that. So it's a character trait, but it is the most important thing in goalkeeping, something I was always very proud about in my personal style of players. I didn't care who was in front of me. From a young age, I would scream at them no matter if I was playing with people I'd never met, if I was playing with people twice my age, twice the most experienced, because it's something that doesn't just benefit the team. You'll see a lot of goalkeepers that talk nonstop during games, and that keeps them focused. A goalie might not touch the ball for 90 minutes, but because they're able to talk and command their defense, stay involved with the game in that way, there's that 90th minute shot on goal and they haven't touched the ball the whole game, they're ready for it. And I would agree with that comment. It is the difference between a good goalkeeper, because you can be a great shot stopper, you can be a good have good distribution, but if you don't have that dominance in the box, if you're not going to come and demand the ball when you're in your 6-yard box, if you're not going to take ownership of your area, then you're always going to be at risk of conceding stupid goals.
Yeah, I think there's also two other elements to it. I mean, some leagues are less demanding in that regard about coming out for crosses and commanding the box than others. And some teams, I think some managers prioritize different things in goalkeepers. Obviously, we see with a Pep Guardiola team, you have to be able to play out of the back, and that's just becoming so much more common now that guys who could command the box previously but weren't so great with their feet are maybe a little bit of a dying breed.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was interesting. I was watching one of the Premier League games this weekend, and the commentator just made a comment on the analysis and said that sometimes now goalkeepers are being asked to use their feet in a way that isn't even in their comfort zone. They're being demanded to be more of a field player, which actually is coming at a sacrifice to their actual goalkeeping ability, if that makes sense. So instead of having the best shot stopper in goal, they're having the best field player because they're prioritizing, like you say, the distribution side of things over the goalkeeping aspect.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to see how it's flipped that way. I mean, you've always seen, I think, good managers have tried to include keepers in, if you're a manager who does a lot of the rondos, for example, and the possession drills, good managers have always incorporated their goalkeepers there. They're not, off to the side, just hanging out doing goalkeeping training. They're involved in the other things. But now that feels like even more of a priority. And like you say, for some, that's more important than dealing with crosses, for example.
It's putting a lot of pressure on the goalkeeper to build their repertoire. And I think in the States, in fact, and I can't speak for in England, I know in England I was specialized as a goalkeeper from 6 years old, but here coaches aren't encouraged to let someone play in goal for the whole time at a young age. They're encouraged to get the minutes on the field to improve their feet. And actually in college, my freshman year, when I wasn't a starting goalkeeper, the coach told me, hey, go play in some outdoor leagues, go play in some adult leagues and get touches outside with your feet, because that's the area right now that's letting your game down. And it did help, but it comes at a cost. It's that sort of finding that balance, because if a kid isn't specializing in goal from a young age, if they are playing one half in the net, one half out the net, are they getting enough reps in goal? Are they getting enough repetition, enough tests? Because realistically, how often does a goalkeeper get tested in 45 minutes and a half? Not that often. And, not everyone's Hope Solo. Not everyone can become a goalkeeper at 18 years old and be a brilliant goalkeeper.
That leads us to Jorge B., who has a question for you specifically. Jorge's son is 12 years old, and this is his third season playing as a goalkeeper, so started at 9. Absolutely loves it. When the time comes, he'll be trying out for his high school team and then maybe an academy team. Do you have any words of wisdom to help him prepare for that road ahead? He's 12 now.
Never stop loving the game, most importantly. It can be really stressful being in goal. Being a goalkeeper is a different sort of mental preparation. I remember a stage in my life where I got so nervous playing in goal that I wasn't enjoying it anymore. You don't want to get to that stage. Fortunately, I was able to sort of take a step back, take a breather, and remember why I wanted to play in goal and find that fun again. But at a young age, if you have these big dreams, you need to nurture them, keep loving them, but don't become so focused on the end goal that you sort of stop enjoying the individual moment. As a goalkeeper, it can be tough. Everyone expects a lot of you. You're the last line of defense. If you make a slip up, it's a goal. It's the most unforgiving position on the field. So you have to enjoy it and be having fun. And then, like you say, it's about focusing on those small little details that separate you from other goalkeepers, because with trying out for high school, with trying out for the big academies, the coaches are going to be looking for certain things that set you apart. Everyone that's at these trials is most likely going to be a good shot stopper. Most of them are going to have good distribution. It's about the little things that separate you. Are you talking to your defense? Are you communicating? Are you commanding? Those are the little things that you want to focus on that separate you from just being a good shot stopper. Because, like I said in the last comment, how many times does a goalkeeper get called on to make a save? When you look at most stats, goalkeepers are making big saves 4 times in a game. It's about the little things you're doing off the ball that are more important.
All right, we have a little bit of breaking news to get to right now. Not not a shock. It had not been announced up until a couple of minutes ago. Bastian Schweinsteiger has retired. He is ending his active career at the end of this season with the Chicago Fire. Also, obviously, legend for Bayern Munich, Manchester United, the German national team. But he finished in Chicago, and he's not coming back for the 2020 season. It's felt like this season in MLS, and Schweinsteiger only spent a couple of years here, but he'll be part of the Chicago Fire's legacy and MLS's legacy. We've seen Michael Parkhurst announce his retirement. Two U.S. national team legends in DeMarcus Beasley and Tim Howard. Nick Raimondo is also hanging it up at the end of the season. So many players who have meant so much to all of us watching the game are leaving the game this year. It's almost like a changing of the guard in some ways.
Yeah. We've heard it described as an end of an era, that kind of thing, where it's a lot of players that have had such a huge contribution into shaping MLS into what it is today. Schweinsteiger was a player that when I started getting into MLS, I was always surprised that he was playing in the league. It kind of, without sounding ignorant, it was one of the reasons why I started to respect the league more, when players of that caliber are seeing this as a place where they want to go. And as much as he has only been here a few years and now he's retiring, I wouldn't say he came as sort of one of those players that's just trying to get a paycheck. He was
he still had something to give.
Significantly. Exactly. And that's what sort of changed my perspective. And it's players like that are offering so much to MLS. They're not coming here for that money. They're coming here to perform because they believe that this league has something to offer. And I think they've sort of set the tone for those players that, and I heard earlier on the show, you were describing players that are coming for the right reasons now and are coming because they see that MLS has something to offer, and they're opening that gate for who is going to replace him. Is it going to be, someone from a draft like it would have used to be, or is it going to be someone from Europe, from South America? Because those gates are now open because players believe in what the league has to offer.
Yeah, it feels like MLS going into year 25 next year with that crop of players, and now we add Schweinsteiger to it, that crop of players leaving the league, to me, it feels like it's about to get younger. It feels like it's about to get even more diverse in terms of where those players are coming from, whether it's the young South Americans that we've seen in recent years. I think younger European players, especially guys from smaller leagues who look at, do I want to play in a smaller league and be a big fish, or come to MLS and still be a big fish to a degree, but be in a league that you could consider bigger now?
Yeah, and you talk about the fan bases, because look, we always point at England and Spain as being where soccer takes place, where the goal is to end up. But when you talk about those leagues, mostly you're focusing on La Liga and the Premier League. You see what you watch on TV, you see what you see on NBC. But when you start dropping down those ranks, when you start getting to League One, League Two, even the Championship in England to an extent, one, the level is dropping off, but most importantly, the fan base is dropping off. You're getting people with 8,000, 9,000 fans in the crowd, and you get that in a good USL Championship team here. So as much as players go to play for the standard of soccer, deep down, one of the nicest things about being a professional is having that crowd, having that fan base, feeling like you mean something to someone. So that definitely is a draw of attraction, particularly, and we've seen more players sign from teams. I mean, look at Manone, who's on loan from Reading. He wanted minutes. He didn't turn his nose down at MLS, and he's really had a big impact into why Minnesota are doing so well this season.
Huge. And look at what he's playing in front of. At Allianz Field, one of the greatest fan bases in the league, one of the most passionate. I mean, the whole thing with Wonderwall at the end of wins, you hear it from the outside, you're like, okay, I don't really get this, but whatever. And then you see it. It's incredible. Like that, if you're a player and you get that from your fans after a match, that's going to make you want to come back, and that's going to help recruit other players. You want to play in front of them.
And look, I love my Reading team, but the Medeski Stadium right now with a team that's struggling is getting, 12, 13,000 fans, and they're not fans that are cheering and supporting 100% of the time. These are fans that are disappointed, that they feel like their team should be doing better. And Manone wouldn't have even had a sniff at starting at this point. So for him, he's doing what's best for his career and what's best for his confidence, because there's nothing worse as a goalkeeper than being on the bench, not getting those minutes when you know that your career is sort of dwindling out. You're getting to your prime. You need to be getting minutes if you're going to keep sharp.
100%. We had a question come up, and it's from our friend Tafka, who is a huge Sergiño Dest fan. So Sergiño Dest is at Ajax, breaking into the first team, becoming a key element of that squad. And Ajax posted a picture today. It's got from the U.S. flag emoji to the Ajax symbol on Twitter. And it says Sergiño Dest and Alex Mendez, hashtag for the future. Picture, Ajax for the future, two guys, quote from Mendez. Mendez has an American flag on his shoulder. Dest doesn't. And there's been a huge question about who Sergiño Dest is going to end up playing for, whether it's the United States or the Netherlands. We've tried to touch on this at times in the show and how difficult that can be, but it's not an easy decision for any young player, and I think this one's unique because we haven't had many U.S. and Netherlands opportunities for players. I don't think there's a direct
Mexico,
blueprint.
Too.
U.S. Mexico or U.S. Germany. We had a run of that for a while too.
Dan Williams, good old Danny Williams.
Danny Williams, Jermaine Jones. We've seen a few of those, but this one is a young player who is not in a situation where he's trying to hang on and hope he gets a call up from the Netherlands. He could get called up by either one because he's that good of a young player, and there's not a decision that meets every player. I think every player is an individual here. It's not easy for Sergiño Dest to decide his future at this point.
No, it's a really tough decision to make because playing for your national team is meant to be more than just playing on the national stage. It's about representing a team or a country, rather, that you feel a loyalty to. We see a lot of times in the women's game, just growing up with some of my teammates, when you're from England, oftentimes you have relatives that are Welsh or you have relatives that are Scottish or Northern Irish. And realistically, the easier call up is to be called up for one of the other home nations, not for England. So there are a lot of girls that I knew growing up with that switched their allegiances. But it's a tough one because if it's one of those distant relatives, you don't really have a connection to that team. You don't have a connection to that flag. When there's players talking a different language, you don't feel part of it. So it's always a tough call to make. It's one of those where you have to look at the level you're going to be playing, how much are you going to get called up. But most importantly, I do think it has to be a gut feeling about which country you feel the most strongly alleged to, you know?
Yeah, the feeling element of it is something that has come up and I think been twisted so many different ways. I'm with you. I think you have to have a feeling. There has to be something there. If you're just doing it because I have two options, and I'd really like to play for one, but I'm not going to be good enough to play for that team, so I'll settle for the other team. And then you don't have that same feeling. It happens.
There's a lot of settling, and for me, it's one of those where, look, I was never really in the mix of international soccer. Maybe as a youngster, there were some youth camps that I could have been called up to, but deep down, I don't think I could have ever represented another nation, even if I found a Welsh grandfather somewhere, which was what, honestly, there were Welsh scouts that were asking, do you have any Welsh relatives? Yeah. Even if I'd have found one, I don't think I could have played for Wales because it would have felt wrong. I would have felt like I was a fake, a phony, you know, because I don't have any connection to that culture, to that country. But some people really want a chance on the international stage. And I think that not all cases of picking a team are like that. Oftentimes there are people that, with the Germany-US one, a lot of people from the States grew up in Germany as military families and they went to school there. So maybe that is a connection there. But it's an odd one and it's a very personal decision. And it's a tough one to speculate from the outside because I think a lot of it does have to be about a gut feeling and a connection to that country.
Yeah, and I think that's it. It's a personal decision that no two situations are the same because we've seen it often, and I'll go back to a player who I don't think gets enough, talk in the U.S. men's national team circles, but was a hugely influential player when he made the decision to represent the U.S. and Thomas Dooley. Dooley came to, from Germany, played for Schalke, was a top-level player in Germany, but not a German national team player, and had the ability to come represent the United States and did, and he threw himself into what it was to be part of the U.S. national team. And if you're going to make that jump and you're going to make that decision, there's something that's pulling you there, whether it's career or a relative or something that you're like, you know what, I want to learn more about that part of my history. I want to learn more about that connection. When players throw themselves into it and then truly become part of that group, when they start from the outside but become part of it, that's when it's special.
Because I think that fans, particularly fans of countries where soccer isn't just a hobby or it's more than just a sport, it's like, particularly their international team, it's a matter of life and death in some cases. They'll sniff out if it's a fake move. They'll sniff out if you have the same loyalty to the country. They'll sniff out if you're not learning the national anthem. You're not.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's obvious. It becomes clear when players are not 100% genuine, I guess is maybe not even the fairest way, but not 100% committed is maybe the best way to put it.
And that would be the word. I think it's the commitment. They're not 100% buying in. They're in it for themselves, for their reputation, to say that they are an international player over the fact that they want to represent this country because they have a love for the country.
Let's get into another topic that's come up this morning. It started making the rounds yesterday. We talked about it on Soccer Over There. An article in Globo Esporte in Brazil about the first ever 24-team Club World Cup. It's set to happen in the summer of 2021. FIFA has not announced anything yet. These are all from previous reports and from the Globo Esporte report. 3 teams from CONCACAF would be potentially invited. The previous reports had 8 from Europe, 6 from South America, 3 each from Africa, Asia, CONCACAF, and 1 from Oceania. Does this excite you about a World Cup, like not just the Club World Cup that we have now, where the top teams drop in and play a semifinal, play a final, and that's it? This would be like a World Cup where you go and you play a group stage, and it's set up just like that, and you get potentially an Atlanta United playing in a group with a Liverpool, a Boca Juniors, and an African team.
It's exciting because it's so diverse and it's going to show all the different levels of soccer. But like we discussed a long while back, Jason, on the Women's World Cup show, my fear would be that there would be a huge disparity between teams, realistically. I do have to wonder how an Atlanta United would face against a Man City or a Liverpool or a Barcelona or a Real Madrid. And that's not to disrespect the level, but are the leagues, and we talk about Oceania, we talk about Asia, are those teams at the same level to compete, and does that make for a fun watch? As a neutral, how many people enjoy watching a team get trashed 13-0 in a uncompeted game like the US-Thailand game?
It's tough.
It's one of those. It sucks, doesn't it? And it sucks for those players on the team. It sucks for the fans of that team. But I think it would be a good money maker. I think that there'll be a lot of people that would want to travel. I think a lot of people would tune in. But I think there has to be some sort of smaller playoff round, or I'm not sure how it would work having such a big disparity between the levels of those leagues.
I think it's a different conversation than the Women's World Cup, and honestly the Men's World Cup too, with it expanding here soon too. I mean, you're going to expand it because you want to make more money. Totally understand that. I get the financial side of it. But in this case, I don't know if it's the same as the Women's World Cup, where it's almost a necessary step to expand it, to increase the investment in more women's national team programs from different federations. This is a little different. would I don't know, Auckland City, I think, is a New Zealand team that's been in the Club World Cup before. Would them going to a group stage where they get trounced by, Manchester City, and they get trounced by a Boca Juniors, and then have a competitive game with an Asian or African team or a CONCACAF team, is that going to increase investment in that club in New Zealand? Probably not. It's not going to have the same effect that it would on the women's game.
And I think what would concern me would be, realistically, a lot of Auckland City fans, for example, are probably Man City fans or Liverpool fans. They have that EPL team. Just how with Atlanta United, most Atlanta United fans who, particularly those that were into the sport before Atlanta got a team, have their Premier League team. So my concern would be, maybe you're trying to invest by having a game in Auckland, but how many of those Auckland fans then, spend money on Auckland merchandise, or do they end up coming purely to watch the Premier League team or the La Liga team that's playing in their stadium?
See, I don't know. I can actually buy into the idea that can be a good thing for a smaller team because, look, it's common at this point, and I think you can speak to it too. In England, it's really changed. That from what I've read is you always have your local team, but with the rise of the Premier League and even the European leagues on TV, it's so much easier if you are a Reading fan to also pick a Liverpool or Manchester City or Barcelona or Bayern Munich.
That's a very...
It happens.
It happens. It definitely happens. But I think there's a strong loyalty. There are a lot of people that have their second team.
Exactly. Second team. That's the way I would put it.
I really pained with being told, "Oh, you're a Reading fan, but what's your Premier League team?" It's become a very normal question to be asked. "Oh, but what's your?" For me, I have my one team, which is Reading, and then yes, I follow Atlanta United because of being here. I don't think it's a problem for people that follow another team. Let's be honest, it does make games more fun when you have a horse in the race.
Mm-hmm.
And with the expansion of TV, where there's so many games, sometimes it is weird watching 6 soccer games over the weekend and not having someone to pull for in each of the games, or picking someone, to pull for the underdog. So I do get it. And I guess on the flip side, when we talk about that investment, it is a good thing for the club because, for instance, you look at the FA Cup in England. When a underdog gets through, sometimes because of the FA Cup, the way it's played, it's sort of like the Open Cup where, Georgia Revs had a chance to make it all the way in. When there's that underdog getting all the way to the third round where the big boys enter, they want to get Man United. They want to get a huge team because they want to bring in the audience. They want to make that money from gate sales. So I guess there would be some positives for those smaller, per se, teams in the Club World Cup having that opportunity to play against a huge team. My fear would be that the blowout that entailed, and, maybe I'm not giving enough credit to these other leagues, but you have to wonder whether an Oceanic team would compete with a La Liga or a Premier League team.
And they wouldn't, and I think they know that going in. I think you'd have some that would be in the happy to be there situation, and I think this tournament is proposed at this point to be in China. So to get the opportunity to interact and raise the worldwide stature of the club and all that would be a benefit. I think there's definitely a benefit, but would it, from an MLS perspective, and DJ had these questions about this, and I like where DJ's going. So he asks if the new qualifications would be an issue for MLS scheduling going forward. Would it be a topic of discussion during the upcoming CBA negotiations? Would it put pressure on MLS to allow owners to spend more money? I mean, I think it could in those regards.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many rules. And you and John did a great job of trying to explain it earlier with the rules with money.
I still have a headache.
That's been the hardest thing for me to enjoy as a MLS fan and a newly converted one that honestly hasn't had that background information. All I've ever grown up with is a transfer window. And yes, sometimes it's ugly. Sometimes it sucks that a team gets bought out by a rich owner and suddenly becomes a powerhouse like Man City, for instance. But money talks in soccer, and we have to sort of learn to accept that. And MLS, with all its rules and all its confusing different things and protecting players and not being transparent about contracts, stuff like that, is what makes MLS harder to get into for fans. I feel like, particularly fans from countries that are used to that transparency, that are used to being excited following the transfer window, understanding what's going on. It's a barrier, and it's a barrier to the progress of MLS, because when you look at the worth of teams, if for instance, an Atlanta United faced off against Liverpool, when you would look at the difference in the value of the players, in the wage of the players, it would be a disgusting disparity.
Yeah, it would. It would. And you look at the revenues of them, too. You know, that's why it is the way it is. Now, can it change? I think so. But MLS is structured differently, and that's what makes it so unique. And I think why it is what it is going into year 25 next year, because you didn't have the culture to allow clubs to develop in the way that they did in other countries. You know, Liverpool didn't become the behemoth that they are from a business perspective overnight. It took time to build into that, and not every club in the Premier League is even at that level, let alone your League One and League Two sides.
That is one of the positives. We do have to praise MLS to an extent, because they do keep things to some extent closer because of those rules.
It is an all for one for all kind of idea.
You look at the way that relegated teams struggle when they get relegated from the Premier League, because they lose such a huge amount of money from the TV deals, from the season ticket sales, from different benefits of being in the top division in England. And it's sad. Look at the relegation zone right now in the Championship, and it's filled with two teams that got relegated from the Premier League. The chances of double relegation in England are pretty high because of that monetary importance. So that is a good thing of MLS to an extent. But if there's going to be more opportunities for teams in MLS to compete against teams outside MLS, if there's more cups, more competitions, more encouragement of that, then something to an extent has to be adapted slightly.
Agree. Totally agree. I think it's looking at what American sports leagues have done to increase spending, but not dramatically leave anyone behind. I mean, you're going to get separation. The more you allow spending, you're going to get separation, because it allows ownership groups with more resources to stretch away from clubs that don't have that. You know, Atlanta United could spend more money if they wanted to. I think they would. I don't know if every other team in the league would spend at that same level. So then it gets stretched.
Particularly with dual owners who prioritize the American football side of things financially to the soccer side of things. Or a lot of clubs don't have the luxury of Atlanta United with their ticket sales, with their merchandise sales.
They just don't have the revenue.
Financial fair play. The financial fair play, if that was something in MLS, where you have to make as much money as you spend, a lot of clubs wouldn't be able to spend very much at all if that was the case.
And this is what's so interesting to me when you start talking about a Club World Cup, and there's been talk in the past about MLS clubs participating in the Copa Libertadores, and Jim Lepp brings up a valid question. It would be disruptive to the domestic schedule. You would have to sacrifice somewhere to make it work. Is it worth it? Would MLS teams benefit from that increased level of competition, which my guess would increase in spending?
Because the likelihood is that it's a team that is also in CCL. It's a team that's also making a run in
all that would have to get figured out. Yeah.
So a team like Atlanta United, who's already seen such a schedule compression as it is, throw in something else, and you're looking at overkill, and it's not possible. I understand that teams play a lot and these are athletes, but we already saw the drop off in performance based on a compressed schedule, and we see it in England over Christmas, where there's the ridiculous Christmas schedule where teams play Tuesday, Saturday for a huge long period. The standard drops, and it wouldn't be fair to penalize a team for representing MLS on a higher level by not making adaptations to the schedule.
You'd have to. I mean, I think back to the first time that FIFA tried something like this. I think it was called the Club World Cup or Club World Championship or something, when they did it in Brazil in 2000, and Manchester United participated in it, and it was a huge uproar because they did not participate in the FA Cup. And that just doesn't happen. That's just not anything that ever happens.
At least make it the Carling Cup. You know, it has to be the crappy cup.
They had to pull out of that to be able to make it work and rearrange the schedule as well, because they went to Brazil for 2 weeks.
And that's the thing, we forget that China is a long way away from everywhere. The time difference, all of those changes, it's going to be a lag on those players. And what do you sacrifice? Do you sacrifice Open Cup? But as we saw this year, Open Cup is a way to CCL. It's an important competition. It's historic. It's the FA Cup per se of America, and it has a lot of history. So I can understand that uproar from United, because FA Cup is the most special competition in England.
Yeah, it's such a balance, because I really do think that MLS teams competing on a higher plane would benefit the league. I think it would increase the perception, it would increase the reputation, it would force increased spending, it would force larger roster sizes.
It would benefit the players playing in MLS, because they have an opportunity to showcase their talent on a completely different stage in front of different teams. Maybe it's Atlanta United versus Man City that leads to a big money move for a player. You know, you never know these things, and
either way, and that's what's interesting about it. And that's where, like, I think it would be a selling point for an Auckland City is, okay, you're going to play Manchester City and you're going to get beat 6-0, and Manchester City is going to play 50%, at 50% intensity. Okay. But now when a player who is aging out of Manchester City, getting towards the end of their career, they're looking for that next challenge. Hey, I really enjoyed this Auckland City team. They were in the Club World Cup. I remember them. They're offering me a contract. I'll go play for them for a year. That'd be fun. That'd be a nice way to end my career. From the MLS side, it's different, because then you're going to get that guy who can't break into the Manchester City team, who is 28, 29, and is like, you know what? I want to play. I don't want to just be part of a big team and be on the roster and not play. I want to play. I really like their standard. I like the way that they play. I'm going to explore that. It puts you in a different conversation, I think, internationally. It could be interesting.
Yeah, and it may create those partnerships or friendships that occur with transfers. There's teams that become almost like unofficial lenders and borrowers, that it's always the way that they loan each other players. And that could be an exciting link for a team like Atlanta United.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating as MLS gets bigger and grows on a bigger scale. Jess, thanks. This was kind of a cool, wide-ranging conversation that went everywhere.
I love it.
Because that's Tuesday Thoughts.
My brain exploded. It's really cool to talk about all these different subjects. And like I say, embracing MLS has been a huge learning curve for me. And you and John have helped with that. So I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to share my knowledge with others.
Anytime. And we'll be back on the call for Oglethorpe. We have a doubleheader Friday and a doubleheader Sunday. It's going to be a busy weekend.
Absolutely. Let's go rest our voices.
Yes, definitely that. Well, you go rest yours. I've got Jarrett Smith joining me for the next segment and see what Jarrett thinks about a Club World Cup and a few other different things. But thanks for the time this morning. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're going to take a quick break, get Jarrett Smith on the line right after this.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service Ad Council and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Ray Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinsky of Apolinsky and Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
Welcome back. Final segment, Soccer Down here on a Tuesday Thoughts edition. John's in Rome, Jess tagged in for a little while, and now Jarrett Smith joins us. He is out of the concrete dungeon that he calls an office, I guess?
I mean, that's fair.
It's just the signal is unbelievably crazy in there.
It is. It's ugly.
It's not really a dungeon.
I got no justification for it.
I'm being unfair. It's just a lot of concrete and blocking signals and stuff.
To be fair, you don't know that, to be fact.
Oh, well, okay. I was trying to give you an out, but all right, fair enough. I'm going to throw a difficult Tuesday Thoughts at you to start.
Okay.
So Matt Doyle and all of the writers about Major League Soccer had to get their end of the year awards voting in yesterday, and many of them have posted their awards and how they voted, which is great. I love to see that. I wish other leagues did that too. Matt Doyle posted his about an hour ago. No massive surprises. Bradley, Coach of the Year, 1. Almeida was 2. Yep. Mark Anthony K, Comeback Player of the Year, 1. Jordan Morris was 2. Cool with that. Rookie of the Year, Andre Shinyashiki from Colorado, 1. Hassani Dotson, 2. I would vote that way, too. That. Goalkeeper of the Year, Matt Turner, number 1. Bill Hamid, number 2.
I absolutely see a case for Turner.
I do, too.
Because he's been insane, but it's just the amount of games he's played is not really in the same category.
Yeah, I got to lean that way, too. And I mean, obviously,
and it's not a slight against Turner. I think if he plays more games, he's going to win the award.
Yeah, I agree. If he plays 26 games, I think you give him the award. But 20 games, I just don't think it's enough.
Neither do I.
Newcomer of the year. Go ahead.
No, it's all that being said. If he wins it, I'm not going to consider it some wild injustice. Like if they end up giving it to him, I'm not going to throw anything over that because I think, like I said, if he plays 6 more games, I think he's going to win it anyway. I think it's too few games, but I don't think it's anything worth throwing things over either.
Yeah, I think it's too few. I think it's Gazan and Hamid, and I'm going to lean Gazan because I think he's had more of an impact on a stronger team than Hamid has had on DC. But you could go either way. Both have been excellent this season, and Turner's been excellent. I just don't think he's played enough games. Eber as Matt's Newcomer of the Year. I think Carlos Heel would like to have a word.
I think Eber's been, if he could stay healthy, God, if he had stayed healthy, I think he would have been able to separate a bit more from there. But guy making a huge impact on a team that won the conference. I see why it went that way, and I'm fine with that. I think Carlos Heel, does have an argument, but even just watching games, they were different with Eber up top, and in a good way for them.
True,
gotta hope
absolutely
that leg
true.
Gotta hope that calf is not a lingering thing
Yeah.
if you're in New York City, because as we saw when they came into Atlanta, it's a different team. Even in the limited time we saw him on the field, it's a different team with him up top than without.
See, we didn't get a chance to see the New England Revolution without Carlos Heel because he started 34 games this year, and he scored 10 goals and had 14 assists. I think he's the newcomer of the year. I thought he was that good and that impressive, and a best 11 candidate as well. And he doesn't make the best 11 for Matt Doyle. We'll get to that here in a second. Defender of the year, Ike Opara, Miles Robinson, 1-2. I'm okay with that. I know a lot of people have been worked up about it. I think Ike Opara, if he's not in Minnesota, if he doesn't have the year that he's had, Minnesota is scrambling to be number 7 in the postseason if they get there. I think he's had a huge impact on that team.
Like a lot of things, I think, especially in Atlanta, we associate the glimpses we get of teams, I think we associate with what we see. And I think for a lot of fans, the lasting image of Opara is misplaying that ball that let Joseph literally 30 yards offside have a walk-in goal. Meanwhile, he just was lights out, and he was lights out in a way that I still wonder, like, how did he get away? Like, why was he traded?
Yeah.
Did they think he couldn't do this anymore? Because not like Kansas City couldn't use some defense. Like, I just still don't get that.
No, I don't either. I don't understand it. MVP, I think no surprise here. Carlos Vela won. Joseph number 2. I'm good with that. Vela had a ridiculously stupid year.
Vela had the best individual statistical season in the history of this league.
Yes.
So, yes.
You're winning MVP when that happens. Best 11. Here we go. This is where it gets interesting. Matt Turner in goal. He's your goalkeeper of the year. You're going to go with that. We've already had that discussion. Got it.
You want to make him a best 11? I'm cool with that. Even if you don't give him the goalkeeper of the year, if you're picking a best 11,
see, I don't think you can do that. I think if you pick him as goalkeeper of the year, he has to be your goalkeeper on the best 11. I think it has to be that way. But back line, Anton Tinnerholm, Ike Opara, Miles Robinson, Kai Wagner from Philadelphia. I love that Wagner's included here because he's a very underrated player who hasn't really been talked about a ton this season. Huge addition for Philadelphia. And Tinnerholm, I think Tinnerholm's one of the best right backs in the league.
Yeah, he's going into the season, I thought it was going to be Taxi 1 and then Franco 2. Hasn't worked out that way, especially for Franco, who has been inconsistent and then spent a lot of time at center back. When I know I was, in hearing DeBoer earlier in the season, I know they talked about playing that 4-man back line. I thought Franco as a right back here can feast.
I think that was the idea.
It really didn't materialize because of injuries, because of changes, this, that, the other. Man, it's still like Kamar Lawrence is still a monster, but Tinnerholm, it's not fair that New York gets like 2 of the best right backs in the league. But man,
well, Lawrence would be on the left side. See, you're thinking Michael Murillo, who's another one who would be in that mix. I think coming into the season, Murillo and Lawrence for the Red Bulls last year was the best outside back pairing, and both have had injuries. Murillo's lost his spot. That's one of the bigger questions this year. If I'm doing a ballot, the biggest question has been what is going on at outside back with the New York Red Bulls with Lawrence and Murillo not doing what they did last year, and Reese Buckmaster being signed from Red Bulls too and playing over Murillo a lot.
I mean, you brought in Buckmaster to try and earn a spot, and you do the same thing that I want to see Frank do here, and that I think a lot of teams should be doing, and the fans should want to see their teams do is, hey, that guy is kind of treading water. We've got guys in the academy or guys who have graduated the academy. Let's see if they can earn a spot. Push guys. We want to see guys get pushed. And if you get pushed and you respond the wrong way, you responded the wrong way. I mean, good on Reese Buckmaster for taking advantage of an opportunity there. I would expect Atlanta to do the same thing, going forward. If somebody's just not doing well, hey, you've got
to have that competition within the squad. three midfielders on Matt Doyle's best 11. Edward Atuesta from LAFC, Jonathan Dos Santos from the LA Galaxy, Maxi Morales from NYCFC. And then the three up front, Vela, Zlatan, Joseph. That's going to be on everybody's ballot, and it should be.
Yeah, that's fine by me. I want to say I saw someone talk about Nagby. I love Nagby. I don't love him more than I love those three guys in the midfield.
No, it's hard. I mean, Jan Gregush should be in that conversation.
That's another one. He should be in that. If you're making a bench for your MLS Best 11, Gregush has to be on that bench for what he's done for that team.
I'm going to pull this up right now. The best 11 according to ratings and who scored. And they put it in a 4-4-2, which is a little different, but I think the way the players actually worked out, it's about the same. So their goalkeeper, according to ratings from who scored, and they do this not from a voting standpoint. This is statistical things that they have their own formula. It's not always 100%. I disagree with it from time to time, but I think it's a pretty good guide. Goalkeeper for them is no one we have mentioned so far. Maxime Crépeau.
Stood on his head all year long.
He's been absurd.
Atlanta fans saw that firsthand.
One of the best saves I've ever seen in my life.
A triple save against Atlanta United up in Vancouver. Man, Crépeau's probably the reason Vancouver doesn't set the record for most goals in the history of this league against.
I mean, I can't remember how many saves he made against San Jose when they gave up 40 shots. I want to say he made 13 or 14 saves.
He made one of the best performances you will ever see in this league. And, man, I know it's sacrilegious in this country to compare it to the Belgium game, but it was kind of like the Belgium game.
Oh, it was definitely like the Belgium game. It was ridiculous. The back line. So they do four across the back line. Opara is in there, and he's the only one in there out of Matt Doyle's best 11, and generally what I've seen too. Three guys who have not been mentioned at all. Left side, Ryan Hollingshead from FC Dallas. 34 matches played this season. Been really, really good. He's played some in midfield, and that's probably why he doesn't get this type of conversation, because he's very versatile. FC Dallas doesn't make the playoffs without Ryan Hollingshead. One of those underrated guys.
I love the way Dallas did everything this year. They just stuck to what they were going to do. Still go back to when they came into the Benz and just had a game plan and executed it perfectly, and executed two absolutely perfect counterattacks with two absolutely pinpoint crosses to get 2 goals. And then Jesse Gonzalez stands on his head and makes 4 or 5 saves in that game he had no business making.
True. The center back partner for Opara in the Who Scored Best 11 is Frederick Briant of DC United.
Okay, then. Didn't expect that.
Call me by surprise. 34 appearances. I mean, he's been there every game. Very high
Briant
rating.
just feels like that workman. Just that worker bee mentality kind of vibe, but good on him.
Another underrated player.
Sneaky good.
Yeah, sneaky good. Sneaky good on the right back, too. Jorge Morera of Portland Timbers. 26 appearances, a guy who flew under the radar with a Portland team that you talk about Diego Chara, you talk about Diego Valeri, you talk about Brian Fernandez and what he's brought to the team since coming in, Jeremy Abobasi. Morera gets, kind of left out of that discussion, and he had to replace Alvis Powell, who was a starter in MLS Cup. Morera hasn't missed a beat. In a lot of ways, he's been better than Powell ever was for Portland.
Yeah, it kind of feels like that Carlos Carmona vibe from Atlanta in 2017. If I can make a quick comparison.
That's a really good comparison.
Yeah, a different position, but just a motor. Just kept things going, kept it clean, and just you didn't really notice him unless something went wrong, and things went wrong. They really went wrong on his side.
The front six, according to Who Scored, and I'm going to group it all
I like
together.
that Who Scored has such an aggressive setup. I'm excited for this.
It's a 4-4-2, but they've got Vela and Rossi in the midfield. So,
hey, we're going to win game 6-4.
It is basically a 4-1-5 formation from Who Scored in this. Atuesta is in it as your holding midfielder, which he has to be. He's been epic this season. Alejandro Pozuelo makes the Who Scored Best 11. Pozuelo ended up playing 30 times this season. You don't think he was there that much because he missed the very beginning of the season, but he came in at the end of that first window and immediately had an impact, was really, really good for Toronto all season. But outside of Pozuelo, it's the LAFC trio of Atuesta, Rossi, Vela, and then up top, Zlatan, and Kasper Shabilko gets the other forward role.
I believe if you pull up who scored stuff, I believe Shabilko was like third or fourth in the league.
Yep.
In terms of average who scored, like just insanely good, and is not going to get nearly enough credit for how good he was and how consistent good he was. Yeah, like I think he finished ahead of Joseph.
Slightly ahead of Joseph. That's why Joseph is not in the who scored best 11, because Vela was your number 1, Zlatan was your number 2, Atuesta was number 3, which I love to see a holding midfielder number 3, obviously. The Holding Midfielders Appreciation Society. Edward Atuesta is the leader of that group this season. And then Shabilko was 4, Joseph was 5 in the who scored ratings.
I mean, it felt like at times that Philadelphia was more of the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
And even though that may be the case, it doesn't exempt them from the fact that they had a guy who put together a top 5 season this season in MLS according to who scored. And, you can sit there and say, well, they're more than the sum of their parts, but Shabilko also was one of the best players in the league this season. So it's not like they were just a bunch of scrappy guys all putting together average games.
15 goals for Shabilko. That's a good year.
Yeah, a great year. In the way I guess I'm used to looking at them as a team that just kind of, jumbles it all together and makes it work through just playing hard, playing disciplined. No, they had a guy who they did that, but it also would be a slight to Shabilko to ignore what he did and just say that, well, they're just a bunch of guys who came together. No, they had a guy who legitimately should be in that conversation of a guy whose name should be on the back of more jerseys around this, especially around that city.
Another player from Philadelphia is in the top 10. Yeah, that's a good luck with that one. Another Philadelphia player in the top 10 who we haven't mentioned is another key part of that sum of the parts idea. Jamiro Montero was the 10th highest rated player in the league according to who scored. Versatile, gave you reps as a number 10, gave you reps as a number 8, would drift out wide at times, would play as a second forward at times. Montero could just play anywhere for you, could defend, could attack, could create chances for others. Another one of those guys that is critical to what the Union have done and becoming the third best team in the East.
And if you told me that there was another guy on that Union team who was in the top 10, he's not who I would have thought of. I mean,
no, it's not Medunian.
I would have thought Medunian would have been instantly where I went. Yeah,
there's so many talented players in that team, and Montero is another one who flies under the radar. The other 2 players in the top 10 who did not make the best 11 because of the positions and the competition at positions, Nicholas Ladero with another big year for Seattle. Absolutely critical to them doing anything in the playoffs. And Mark Anthony
he's out for the playoffs.
Who made his big return.
Whew. If Ladero's not there in the playoffs for Seattle, I don't know, he picked up a knock, I think.
He's had a back injury, but he came back in the final match. So 2 more weeks, you got to do whatever it takes.
Yeah, his horse tranquilizer, whatever. Just get him in there, because if he's not in there, it's probably going to end poorly for Seattle.
Easily. I mean, I think that's an absolute. I just don't think they have enough to get what they need to get without Ladero. Ricky Ricardo with a couple of questions to finish us off. So we talked a lot about this Globo Esporte article about the Club World Cup and 3 teams from CONCACAF participating in a 24-team Club World Cup in the summer of 2021. Ricky is on the negative side of it. Ricky says, I'm not a person who can see benefit from playing in a Club World Cup. Getting a chance to play a competitive match against a top European team creates so much exposure for this team and league. We can also use those games to attract and cut off new talent. We may not fight for a player with Real Madrid or Manchester City who commands hundreds of millions, but players who are being loaned out because of not getting time, or players who are trying to leave these big clubs will see our club and see that they can succeed in MLS. The league has to be willing, though, to help teams with scheduling, but there's so much potential benefit. Ricky sees the benefit. Sorry, I misunderstood the first sentence. Ricky sees the benefit from it and is not with people who are questioning being part of a Club World Cup. How would you feel if that's the case? Yeah, sorry, I screwed it up because it's my fault. I'm sorry, my bad. Sorry, Ricky, I apologize.
Man, this entire calendar is going to get weird no matter what you do. Because what is it? If Atlanta, I think you counted out the other day. If Atlanta makes MLS Cup, they're going to play 40 matches, or they could win 40 matches.
Oh no, they're way past that. It'll be 45 for the first round of the playoffs.
Win.
Oh no, they could win 30.
Win 30.
If they win MLS Cup, that will be win number 30.
Okay, so 30. I was wrong. But you're playing, upwards of almost 50 matches in a calendar year. It's going to get sideways one way or another. And I think you take this opportunity if you get it, and you go out there and you do everything you can to get the exposure internationally. You go out there to look good on the international stage for teams, and people recognize the brand at this point, but you wanted to recognize it even more and be an even bigger deal. And you're not going to compete with Real Madrid, Liverpool for the big names. Sure as hell compete. You could sure as hell be out there competing against the Real Betises of the world and the mid-table teams in some of these leagues for bringing guys up from South America, bringing guys over from Europe on loan. There's a lot you could do. You expand relationships as well with other teams. And the more guys you send Miguel Almiron over there, the more guys you send over in time, I think you also improve not just the exposure, but you have a chance to improve the reputation if everything goes right. So I'm all for it. It's just going to be a busy schedule, but it's already going to be a busy schedule.
It will definitely make you prioritize. Just like we had this conversation coming into 19 about what's more important. Is it CONCACAF? Is it the Supporter Shield? And, you have to go for CONCACAF. And if that means you drop some early league matches, it means you drop some early league matches. If you have this in the middle of a season, Open Cup becomes less important because you just can't do both. You're going to have to call up, twos players or academy players or however you can make that work to play those games. And Supporter Shield is probably out the window
against Vancouver next year or 2021.
Well, in Open Cup, you couldn't do that because Vancouver's not in it. But in a league game, if you get to the situation,
that's what I'm saying.
Look, Frank de Boer mentioned it. Frank de Boer said, I'd like to be able to have more movement between these teams because I would want to call these guys in and see a Jackson Conway in one of those situations, or George Campbell will next year be on your roster, but guys like that are going to be important if this type of thing happens. Now, there's a big if. It's an outlet that has not always been 100% correct with these things, but FIFA's talked about having an expanded Club World Cup. I think it would be an amazing thing for the game. I really think the positives outweigh the negatives by a lot.
I'm fine with that, and it'd be great if they make it happen. FIFA doesn't always do what seems logical or seems right.
Well, they do they do whatever the money is going to lead them to do. It's honestly that simple.
There's the shoe dropping on the other end of the other. That's the other shoe that drops there. That may not always seem like a logical or reasonable thing, but if it means money, it's going to happen.
You walk into the FIFA offices and It's All About the Benjamins video by Puff Daddy and the Family is playing on a nonstop loop because everything FIFA does is all about the Benjamins.
I just thought it was the theme to DuckTales and Uncle Scrooge's vault, but
that's in the loop. That's the one that comes after the rock remix of It's All About the Benjamins. So you get all of these things. Any Money by Pink Floyd gets played in that loop. All of it.
Yes. As it
ridiculous. Should. As it should. Final one from Ricky Ricardo. Who from Atlanta would be on your 22 under 22, and where would you rank them? We can't get into the full ranking because I don't have the full 22, but which players under the age of 22 would you put on that list?
Ezekiel Barco's still, 16 years old, so why not?
Not quite, but yes, he's still he would still qualify in the under 22 category, yes.
I'm still salty about Columbus doing a slip and slide into his leg and costing him part of the season. And then, like, not even a yellow card in that play, by the way. I think there's a yellow card for LGP on that play.
Miles is 22, so he would qualify.
If he's going to qualify, he's probably in your top 5.
Miles might be Miles is easily in the top 5 in the league in the 22 under 22. I think top 3 is probably where I would put Miles.
And then, Barco is going to be in that conversation. Basically, if you're going just off of anticipation and potential, George Bello's there. Though we only saw him play 1 game this year, and that was in Costa Rica, which really was a rite of passage. I believe it was Doyle who said it after that game. Said this was really Atlanta's rite of passage. MLS team going to Costa Rica, playing on weird turf, getting beat. And nothing wrong with that. That just means they're an MLS team now.
Yeah, it happens. I think Bello will be part of the 22 under 22 next year after playing a good bit next season. Where Barco would rank in, it's really hard to say. And I'd have to see the rest of the list because I think Ezequiel Barco could be, when he gets that interest and gets a transfer offer to go to Europe, which I think will come in the next couple of years, I think he's going to break the transfer mark. I think he really could be a huge transfer out. And if that's the case, it's kind of hard not to have him as number 1 on this list.
I mean, I could see him not doing it just because this year he wasn't on the field as much.
For this year, I would agree. Yes.
For this year, yeah. Going forward, if he does what he's supposed, if he does what you, I shouldn't say what he's supposed to do. If he does what you expect him to do,
yeah.
If he does that, then he's going to be that guy. I think unless somebody just comes out of nowhere, and I don't know, Mason Toye pops up actually Toye I think will be too old, but you get some young striker pops up at 20 years old and scores 37 goals in a season. Unless something like that happens, I think Barco has the potential to be that guy. But right now, I think it's a matter of just anticipation and excitement because, last year it was, man, what could he be? Now it is, we know what he can be. Just got to stay on the field. And you might lose him for the Olympics next year. You might, hopefully you don't lose him to any more injuries.
Mm-hmm. If he can stay healthy, Ezequiel Barco will. I think he's still the most important player for this team going into the postseason. I think he's the player that can take Atlanta United from very good to great when he's on the field. And next season, if he stays healthy, we could be having some conversations about interest in Ezequiel Barco that might blow your mind. I really do think he's that kind of player. We'll see where it goes. Jarrett, thanks for climbing out of the concrete dungeon. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Climb back in. Hopefully everything goes well.
Yep. We'll see.
We'll see. Yes.
Hey, did we see? Did y'all discuss Schweinsteiger?
Yes, we did.
Okay, cool. I want to make sure.
Do you have a thought you would like to add, though?
They're going to need a center back now, /midfielder, /holding mid, /winger, /attacker. Schweinsteiger was basically that kid on like a U9 team who does everything.
Yeah, I think he kind of enjoyed it for a little while. Then it got old because it's like, why do I have to do everything?
Yeah, it was. I get to play where I get to have fun and do and have fun and try and do different things. Oh, you meant all the time. Oh,
yeah. It's like, can somebody help me, please? Somebody just step up, help me a little bit, please. Somebody. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I can't do it anymore. I'm done. The Chicago Fire have announced their move officially in a full-page ad in the Chicago Sun-Times to Soldier Field. It is the anniversary of the club being announced in 1997. It is the anniversary of the Great Chicago Fire as well. So a definitely on-brand move from the new owner, Joe Mansueto, of the Chicago Fire. And then alongside that, Bastian Schweinsteiger announces his retirement. I think Chicago is going to go make a big signing. Big.
Yeah, we've talked about, we've seen the rumors, and I'm sure the agent played a lot of role in this about Diego Valeri being rumored to be lured away out of Portland. Piatti. There's a lot of teams that could splash the money around, especially in the Eastern Conference. I think We joked about Orlando being one to go get one of those guys. Chicago. I mean, Chicago getting one of those guys. I mean, if they don't go and just go out on the market and look internationally for somebody, hopefully someone under the age of 35, but Chicago is going to be a team that's going to have money to spend, and just we'll see how big their stomach is and how big their eyes are.
I think it's pretty big. I think Chicago is going to be a team to watch in the transfer market, and I wonder if they're going to be a team to watch on the coaching carousel. I don't know yet how that's going to shake out. Orlando's jumped on the carousel with both feet, and they're being linked to quite a few different names. No idea where that's going to go.
Orlando has their name engraved on one of the horses on the carousel.
That's true. That's true. They have a purple horse. It's already claimed for them. Sometimes they just let others take a ride on it. And
it goes up and down like most carousel rides, but only goes up so far.
Yeah, it doesn't go up very high, so people leave that horse pretty quickly.
Take.
Yeah. Ugh. We'll see what happens, but that's going to do it for today on a Tuesday Thoughts edition. Thanks for all the questions. Thanks for all the interesting topics that popped up. Lots of fun today. Thanks to John from a car headed to Rome. Thanks to Jess, and thanks to you, Jarrett, from escaping the dungeon and chiming in. Always a good time.
Always.
And we will be back tomorrow with a Wall Pass Wednesday episode as we get ready for the playoffs and as we get ready for an international break. And we'll talk more U.S. national team as CONCACAF Nations League kicks off on Friday for the U.S. against Cuba. Mucha plata, y'all.
Mucha plata, y'all.